this year, Parashat Vayeshev, as Vayeshev begins, the whole story of Yosef begins, and we kind of get into this exciting story, probably one of the most dramatic stories in life, of what happens with Yosef. However, in the middle of this story, this week, we find the story of Yehuda really stuck in the middle of the story. So what is the story of Yehuda doing here? What is it here to teach us? What is the story of Yehuda really about? That's what we've discussed this week.
And as we dove into it, we realized that there was more than one story going on here. Not just the story of Yosef and some comment about Yehuda. There are actually two stories happening here in parallel. Both of them are important to understanding who Yosef and Yehuda are, but also to understanding who we are as Am Yisrael.
Exactly. And as we always do, we dove into the psukim, into the words themselves to see how it fits in. There's a lot of messages over here in the story of Yehuda. Like you were saying, it's not really stuck. There's a meaning behind it. There's a reason behind it. It is part of the story of Am Yisrael. Hope you enjoy it. Take a look. So this week, Parashat Vayeshev, we find the story of Yosef and the brothers. As we've discussed the past 2 years, this is where the whole story of Yosef begins. From now on until the end of the Chumash, we will be following Yosef and what's going on with him as he's becoming our main figure in these stories from now on. However, in the middle of this week's Parashat, in the middle of this great story of Yosef, we find one chapter, one story about Yehuda out of nowhere that it really feels like the story of Yehuda is stuck in the middle. What is it doing here? Even the Torah ends off saying that Yosef was taken down to Mitzraim. Then after the story of Yehuda goes back and Yosef was taken down to Mitzraim, meaning Yosef is the main story here. I just kind of try to push in the story of Yehuda in the middle just to let you know what's going on with Yehuda. And really you have to ask yourself, what is this story here? Rashi obviously makes the connection and says that what happened with selling of Yosef, Yehuda felt bad and that's why he stepped down. His brothers made him step down and he had to leave. But really you have to ask, what's going on over here in the story of Yehuda? What is this story even doing here? How is this story really related? The entire story, how is it related to what's going on with Yosef and his stories? Because again, Yosef is the main story, is the main character from now until the end of Sefer Berashit.
You know, it's very interesting. As you said, the story of Yehuda starts with Vayered Yehuda me'et Echav. He goes down. That's the same word differently used for Yosef at the end of Yehuda's story. Yosef hurad Mitzraim. He was brought down to Mitzrayim. So we see the Torah is obviously making some sort of comparison between these two. And maybe your question lies in assumption, which isn't true. We assume that this is the story of Yosef. Maybe it isn't. Maybe this is actually the story of Yosef and Yehuda. We're always attracted to the story of Yosef. That seems the story of this amazing leader. No matter what happens to him, he somehow comes out. He somehow succeeds wherever he is. Even in the depth, he's always this tzaddik. He always sees godliness. It's really amazing. And we always follow the story of Yosef. But maybe the Torah is teaching us here that there isn't only a story of Yosef. Am Yisrael, as we know and have discussed in the past, is built up of these two types of leaders, even of these two Mashiach, of Yosef and Yehuda. And both of these are important. There are two stories happening here. Just as the story of Yosef is the process that Yosef needs to go through to build up who he is and to build up who he needs to be for Am Yisrael, also Yehuda is going through his process. And it's a different one and a different story. And they both start by going down, by, diving deep. Yosef was forced down. Yehuda goes down, steps down, but they all get into major complications. And each one goes through their own process, which builds up who they are, who their personality is, what their leadership is about. The story of Yehuda doesn't end here. The story of Yehuda will continue to lead us constantly in parallel to the story of Yosef. He's the one who steps up for his father and says he's going to take responsibility for Binyamin. He's the one who at the end steps up to Yosef and they meet, and that's when the story of Yosef and his brothers really changes and takes a turn, when Yehuda stands up. So the story of Yehuda will continue to lead us. We're basically telling two stories, two aspects of Am Yisrael, which are both true and both important. So what is the story of Yehuda? And there are many, many different points that we can dive into this story and pull out a lot, but to focus on the main things, the main themes we see. If Yosef, as we call him, is Yosef the Tzaddik. Yosef is the one that no matter what comes upon him, he sees godliness there. He's able to succeed even in the darkest places. He's never sucked down. No matter how much the world tries to pull him down, he stays above. Yehuda is not that. Yehuda is the one who actually does mess up. He does fail. He isn't brought down to Mitzrayim. He goes down. He leaves. He steps down. He messes up. But he's the one who's able to recognize. He's the Baal Tshuva. We know there's this comparison we have in Chazal between a tzaddik and a Baal Tshuva. If Yosef is the tzaddik, Yehuda is the Baal Tshuva. And the Baal Tshuva is the one one, just like his name, who's able to admit mistakes, but who's also able to thank. The ability to thank, the ability to thank and admit go together, because thanking is the ability to recognize that there's limits, that I have limits, that I need someone else beyond me, that I can't achieve anything. It's recognizing my limits and therefore my ability to receive and accept things from other people. Yehuda has that ability, not the ability to be above it all, that no matter what happens, he's beyond it all. No, the ability to come from below, the ability to grow from below, the ability that even if he messes up and falls down and things don't go as he plans, he's able to get up, he's able to recognize. Yehuda says tzadkami many here. He's able, even with all the embarrassment, to recognize that Tamar was right, he was wrong, he messed up. It's in his name, Yehuda, to thank and to admit and to recognize. To be able to be about tshuva is exactly that. And we see this also with the leadership. Yosef is the one, and we've discussed this, we're not even sure if he's one of the children or one of the forefathers. He's sort of from above. He's the one who lifts us up. He's the one who cares for us in Mitzraim. He's always going to be there, sort of pulling us out of Mitzraim. He's the one who, no matter how far he's pushed down, he's always beyond. And therefore, as we said, he's the man of the world. He's the man of the Olam Hazeh, the one who can lead our influence in raising up this world. Because to do so, as we discussed, you need to be able to not be a slave of this world. You need to be beyond it. And also his leadership is that way. He's chosen to be a leader. He's chosen by his father. He's chosen by Paro. The brothers accept his leadership. Well, they don't really have a choice. We see they fear him, right? He's the leader. They need him. They fear him. Yehuda was never chosen. We don't see him chosen, but somehow he's always the one who takes responsibility. He's the one who everyone looks up to and expects from. When he stands up and says he'll take responsibility, Yaakov accepts that. The brothers look up to him. He's not a leader from above. He's a leader from below. He's a leader who comes from below and lifts us up. He fails. He doesn't always succeed, but he's able to recognize that and therefore grow from below. And this is also who we will see them be forever. The concept of Yosef, the concept of the person of this world who can be the king of Egypt and influence the entire world, and the concept of Yehuda, who Yaakov sends him, lehorot lefanav Goshna. Am Yisrael is going to be in Goshen. He's going to be the king not of the world. He's going to be the king of Am Yisrael. And Mashiach ben David, who has to raise us up, who has to bring the tikkun to the world, to fix things, to make us make the right choices and elevate from the depth, that's going to be Mashiach ben David. But the two are always dependent on each other. If Yosef goes down to Mitzrayim, also Yehuda is taken down. These two will always go together, will always be dependent on each other. Both aspects are true. Both aspects are part of who Am Yisrael are, but we have to follow both of them, and we need both of them to really achieve who we need to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. And as always, I think these ideas that you're saying are really mamash inside the psukim themselves and the story themselves. Starting off with the names of the sons that Yehuda decides to give to his sons, because when you look at the names, you cannot notice the different meanings that they have. Starting from the names, like you were saying about Yehuda's name, that it has two meanings. The same thing also with the names that Yehuda gives to his sons. It's just amazing. Starting with somebody who is awake in the right sense. Uru Yeshanim, do tshuva, wake up from your sin, not in the terms of being woke, but about being awake from your sins and waking up from the bad things you've done in order to correct the world in the right way. However, the opposite side of is being ra. If you flip over, you become ra. Just like the pasuk says, ra b'einei Hashem. He was bad in the eyes of Hashem because he had that strength, he had that power, and he used it the wrong way. Like we've said many times, a sin is a chet in Hebrew. Chet is from the word le'achti, to miss, because you have your strength, you have your power, but you're using it the wrong way. You're using it to the wrong things in the wrong direction, and you're missing your shot. That's what a chet is. You have to wake up and focus and do it the right way. That's what it means to wake up. That's what it means to be and not ra b'einei Hashem. And the same thing also with Onan, the strength, the power a human has for the next generation to create the world, to build the world. The question is, what do you use it for? Do you use it in order to make good in the world, to do good in the world, or for destruction, for your own self, which leads from Onan to Onen, someone who has a relative that died, someone who is in that situation of loss after someone close to them died. That's what Onan is. Do you use that power again for good, or do you use that power for bad? And then the third child on top of all is Shelah. Yehuda, thinking that Shelah is his child and he can decide about Shelah what to do and where to take him, comes along Tamar and teaches him, Yehuda, you got it all wrong. We have to create the next generation to bring Mashiach to the world, and Shelah is hers. Shelah, he belongs to her. Yehuda doesn't understand that, and that's one of the main messages that Tamar is teaching Yehuda, that Shelah is not his, Shelah is hers. The next generation generation, for the Mashiach has to be born. We have to bring it into the world through this correction, like you're saying, through waking up, through using our strength, our power the right way. This is one of the main messages over here, just in the names of Yehuda, Ronan, and Shelah. But on top of all, when you look at the story of Yehuda, there's a main theme going on over here in the story of Yehuda, which when you put it in parallel to what Yosef is going through, you can see opposites, you can see main differences between the two, because like you were saying, Yosef was sold to Mitzraim. Yosef hurad Mitzraim. Yosef's entire story, he's always passive. Yaakov gives him the Ktonet Pasim. He gets the dream. It's not about him. He didn't choose these things. He gets put in the boat. He gets sold to Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, he gets sold to Potiphar. Potiphar turns him into in charge of his home. He then gets into that story with Eshet Potiphar that blames him. He gets thrown in prison, and then in prison again, he becomes in charge of the prison. He gets pulled out, and Paro puts him in charge of all Mitzrayim, and then even Paro marries him off to Potiphar's daughter. This is Yosef. Yosef is always the one that's able to deal with reality that's forced onto him. He's able to deal with it, and within that reality, climb to the top and do the best out of that reality again that was forced onto him. Now, when you look at Yehuda, Yehuda is the exact opposite. Yehuda steps down, like you were saying, but not only does he step down, he makes a lot of choices in this story over here. The whole idea of when you sell something, when you get rid of something, the opposite of it is when you acquire something, when you buy something. And Yosef was sold as a human being. Gnevat nefashot. His personality was sold to someone else to take care of. So Yehuda does the opposite. He goes and he chooses in order to find who he is. But the first thing he does, very interestingly, very different from his father and his grandfather. Both of them were told not to marry Bnot Canaan, not to marry a girl from Canaan. What does Yehuda do? Yehuda steps away and he goes and he marries a Bat Canaan. He marries a daughter from Canaan who is also the daughter of Shua. But the main point is he married someone that his father and his grandfather didn't marry. He steps aside. He goes away. He makes this decision, and within this decision of getting married, he then makes sure to marry off his son. Again, there is Kicha, which is Kiddushin, then you have Yibum, and all of this together, this whole story of Yehuda is about Yehuda choosing who to marry, how to marry, or what we call in Hebrew Kiddushin, of what we call the marriage between a husband and a wife, the Kedusha. And as the Rambam emphasizes, before Matan Torah, this concept of Kiddushin didn't exist in the world, and this is what Yehuda is actually looking for. He's making this choice. He's making this bchira that we talked about so many times in the past few weeks, this bchira that leads into Kedusha, this choosing that leads into holiness, like we say, hekdesh. When you choose something and you turn it towards its great potential, towards its great meaning, that's what Kedusha is. That's what putting holiness into the world is, finding that way, choosing the right thing, and within that choice, making sure that what you chose elevates to that high level of Kedusha. That's the marriage between a husband and a wife. This is what Yehuda is looking for over here. He's looking for that Kedusha. He's looking for that Kedusha. This is what he's looking for. This is what this story is about. Choosing in order to bring holiness into the world, in order to bring Kedusha into the world. But like we were saying, when you have the ability to choose, with great power comes great responsibility. You can also choose the wrong thing. You can also sin, like we discussed back in the first sin in Chet Adam Harishon. What came out of the sin was the understanding that now they have the choice to do whatever they want, not only what God told them. That's what Chet Adam Harishon was about. The first sin in the world was about. This is what Yehuda is showing us over here, the ability to choose in order to find holiness, in order to bring holiness into the world. And then sometimes you miss, sometimes you sin, and within that miss, you have to know how to stand up and admit to your miss, admit to your chet, and that's how you become better. That's how you become even more holier. As we know, the famous midrash, "B'makom shebalei tshuva omdim, ein tzadikim gmurim yicholim la'amod." The Baal Tshuva Yehuda versus Yosef the tzaddik. The two differences, like you were saying, both of them have a life. Both of them are leading a life, are going through an entire process for us to see, for us to learn from, because we need these two aspects in our life. And maybe this is what this whole story over here of Yehuda is doing. It's not a random story that's stuck over here in the middle of the story of Yosef. We just want to get back to see what's going on with Yosef. No, it's important to understand, to see these two stories in parallel, to see these two stories developing in parallel, to see these two personalities developing, becoming who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be, and what they're supposed to teach us, to Am Yisrael.
Beautiful. You know, very interesting that the story of Yehuda ends with the words "Velo yasa," "Velo yasa ledata," meaning he didn't continue the relationship with her after the story ended. And it's interesting because that, you know, in contrast of Yosef, whose name is Yosef, is adding, lahosif, to add. Yehuda lo yasav, and Yosef Yosef urad Mitzraim. And maybe this also connects to exactly the same point. Yosef was about spreading, further, adding. He's constantly growing. He's not only influencing himself, he's influencing his brothers. No matter where he goes, he influences Mitzrayim. He becomes someone who spreads godliness everywhere. In Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim as the center of the world, in the entire world. Yehuda is not that. Lehodot, as we said, to recognize, is about recognizing your limit, recognizing your borders, recognizing where you should add and maybe where you should stop. That's what Yehuda is about. That's what tshuva is about. Saying that, okay, there are things I did wrong. There are things that I went too far. I should focus inwards. And that's why Yehuda is the one who builds inside. Yehuda is not Yosef who becomes the leader of the world. Yehuda is the one who Yaakov chooses to be the leader in Goshen. Goshen, that place where Am Yisrael goes to separate itself from Mitzrayim, to stay separate, because there are certain things that we need for us. Lo yasaf. There are certain things we need to not expand. We need to focus inwards and build inwards. And through that, we will influence outwards. Yehuda is that lead. Yehuda becomes the leader, leharot lefanav Goshna, as opposed to Yosef. Yosef constantly spreading. Yehuda is the lo yasaf, and through that fills his role.
Beautiful, beautiful, very true. Lo yasaf, and then Yosef urad Mitzrayim. Obviously, again, the Torah is making the connection over here. These two stories, these two characters will continue, as you said, with us throughout the next few parashot. We'll see these stories developing each on their own until they clash at the end, make this explosion where Yosef reveals himself. B'ezrat Hashem, who knows, maybe we'll continue this thought in the next few videos too. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, comment below on YouTube, share it with your friends, and of course, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. Also, we'll just remind our viewers what we've discussed the past couple of years, because boy, those videos are super important, especially the one we talked about 2 years ago, really understanding what's going on at the end of the Parsha. Too many people think that Yosef had a lack in bitachon, had a lack in his trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in God, at the end of this week's Parasha, and that's why he got 2 more years in prison. However, that is not true. That is the furthest thing away from the truth. Yosef did not have any lack in bitachon, any lack in his trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll link that video at the end of this one. We'll also link the video to what we talked about last year, what's going on in the beginning of the Parsha. Obviously, over there, it seems like everybody's trying to make things even worse than what they are. Yosef telling more dreams. Yaakov decides to give him an extra garment on top of already the hatred that his brothers have towards him. Why are things escalating so much? Why is nobody doing anything to calm everything down? What exactly is going on over there in that story? We'll link that video too. And in Mitzraim next week, Yitzi, Chanukah, we'll talk then.
Shkoyach, Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom, and Chanukah Sameach.
Shkoyach to you, Shabbat Shalom, and Chanukah Sameach.